WCW was a $25 million a year company that was losing $10 million a year.
You played a heel most of your time on camera. Am I wrong about that?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, you were a bad guy.
She was scared. Tell your daddy. He's still fired. People in my own company thought that the character that I played on TV was the real guy.
If you got tapped by Ari Emanuel to come in and fix WWE or UFC tomorrow, is there anything that you would think of that you would change immediately?
Not really.
I wouldn't be surprised if that happens.
We won't be surprised and we won't be unprepared.
This is Creators Think, and what I like to do is try to interview the most relevant viral content creators in the planet, and we try to extract tips for people at home to watch and how they can apply that to their own life and their content. And I'm here today with Mr. Eric Bischoff, and I'll give you my context with you. I remember when I was a child, and before I had a flat screen TV, you had to have a cabinet, and they had a fat back to them. And I remember I loved waking up at 6 a.m. because I had really bad ADHD and I had to take Adderall and Ritalin as a kid so I could sit in Montessori school and focus. But on the weekends, I didn't have to. So I would wake up at 6 a.m. and I would watch WWF wrestling, my favorite thing in the world, and Jake the Snake and Ultimate Warrior and Hogan and the golden era of wrestling in the 80s and 90s. I loved it. It made me spaz out. I would run around my house like crazy. My parents always knew what I was up to when after I'd watch wrestling. And then I started to discover WCW and understand that Ted Turner had a rival league. And by the way, reading, what was it? I don't know if it was Vince's memoir or maybe it was the Netflix documentary, but learning about how Vince was up against this real billionaire tycoon. That was a super interesting story. But that's where I first saw you. I saw you wore a black leather jacket, you had jet black hair. And this was the guy in my head who created the nWo. And I'm just curious, right, that from that being my context, tell me about where you grew up and kind of like your business journey to getting into professional wrestling and then realizing what your strengths were and how you could fit into an organization, provide value, and what you learned about storytelling, psychodrama that made that whole thing click together. I know that's a bit of a big topic, but just whatever.
I was going to say we should order some food in because we're going to be here for a while. It's, my journey is pretty interesting, I think, in the sense that I never aspired to be in the professional wrestling business. It wasn't a goal. It wasn't even a whimsical thought as a kid. It was really being in the right place at the right time and having whatever it was in my personality that people were interested in hiring. I was a sales guy pretty much all my life. I grew up in Detroit. Was an entrepreneur as a kid. My mom and dad told me the story when I was like 4 or 5 years old. I ran away from home for the first time and decided I was going to take a bus to my cousin's house, which was about 8 miles away. Didn't have any money, so I went around, collected pop bottle caps and sold them door to door. So I imagine some 4 or 5-year-old kid comes to your door, knocks on the door, tries to sell you pop bottle caps. Of course, you're going to buy them just out of, sympathy for the kid, I guess. But that was kind of like the start of it for me. And I got a paper route when I was like 8 or 9 years old. I always worked. I was always fascinated with the idea of making.
What was your father's profession?
My father was, he started out as a draftsman. My father was handicapped. He had a brain surgery when he was about 24, 25 years old. And during the course of the brain surgery, they destroyed the nerves that controlled his arms and his hands. So at a later stage in life, he was handicapped. So he was able to, through mechanical aids, get a job as a draftsman. But I always just had an entrepreneurial instinct. And I got involved with amateur wrestling in high school for a couple of years out of high school. In college, I wasn't really very good. I just loved it. So I competed in AAU freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling. Then got into martial arts and was pretty active in martial arts for a long period of time, pretty competitive. Got out of that and realized, I have to grow up. I've got to make a buck. Got to figure out what I'm going to be when I grow up because, going to karate tournaments around the country isn't a way to pay the bills. Got a job in sales, and that just kind of followed me. Just about everything I did after that was one way, shape, or form sales. And here's the interesting part is about 1980, I don't remember when it was, 85 or so. I had a friend of mine by the name of Sonny Ono. He was Japanese, same age as I am, right? He grew up in Tokyo. I grew up in Detroit. And one night after a karate tournament, we were sitting in a bar having copious amounts of alcohol, chasing women. And I asked Sonny, I said, Sonny, when you were a kid growing up in Detroit, what did you do for fun? Because he grew up similar in a sense that I did in, lower middle class kind of environment. And he told me, when I was a kid, we used to go around and pick up milk bottle caps that they would find, and they would throw them at each other like shuriken stars, those little ninja stars. They would play tag. By the end of that night, we had kind of created a game on a series of bar napkins called Ninja Star Wars. And you buy that game, you get 2 black vests with a Ninja Warrior silk screen on the front. You get a little Karate Kid headband with this real thin plastic eye protector. And you got 6 stars, 3 red ones, 3 white ones. They were made out of Velcro, and you just play tag with them. We thought for sure we were going to make millions off of this game. So we went out and had a bunch of them manufactured in Korea, had them shipped over to the United States. They got here, about 5,000 of them. They got here and we went, shit, how do we sell them now?
Do you remember what your unit cost was?
They were probably around $4.95, $5.25, somewhere. We're selling them for $19.95. But we didn't have anywhere to sell them. So I went to Vern Gagne. Vern Gagne was a professional wrestling promoter in Minneapolis, had one of the most successful territories in the country. And he was an amateur wrestling supporter. So I thought, if I play my amateur wrestling card, because I know that Vern knew my coach, I might be able to get a meeting, and I might be able to convince Vern Gagne, who had a wrestling show Monday through Friday on ESPN, right, from 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I thought, if I could get Vern Gagne to advertise my Ninja Star Wars game on his wrestling show that's seen across the country on ESPN, I might be able to salvage this opportunity. So I went to him. I played the amateur wrestling card. 2 days later, he hired me in a sales position for the AWA.
Selling what?
Syndication, selling his television show.
So you were selling ad space to...
I was selling the television show.
Okay.
So I would go to a local television station, say in Mason City, Iowa, south of Minneapolis. And if they weren't carrying professional wrestling, or even if they were carrying WWE, I would go in and explain to them all the benefits of carrying our particular show.
Roger that.
And that's what I did.
Fantastic. And then, so how does it escalate to big time? Like what did you feel like the big breakthrough was? You got to educate me a little bit. Were you ever working with the McMahon organization, or was it did you go from there to WCW and Ted Turner? How did that happen? And what was the big breakthrough where you really remember, like, you know what, I've got balls. I'm somebody in this organization. I'm going to, sit down with Ted or whoever it was and start coming out from behind the camera and start becoming a guy in front of the camera.
Yeah, I went from Vern Gagne to WCW. I was hired by the Turner organization, WCW. I was kind of like a third string announcer, backup on camera talent, basically. And having spent, I spent 3 or 4 years working for Vern Gagne, who was a very small company. And as such, I was able to learn all the different aspects of the business of the wrestling business, notwithstanding what goes on inside of the ring, but all of the business elements that make professional wrestling work. And I had a little bit of, obviously I had a great deal of experience in syndication sales, which helped me to understand the nature of advertising and the challenges of it. I got involved in production because, to me, television was like this magic box. You knew what came out of it, but I had no idea what you put into it to get that image and that sound out of it. So I was very interested in the technical aspect of television production. And because it was a small company, I was able to learn that. I ended up getting thrust in front of the camera for the very first time in the AWA. I promoted live events around the country in the AWA. So I had a pretty good basis of experience in all of the elements of the business of the wrestling business by the time I got to Turner. So I get to Turner in 1991 as an on-camera talent, and there were a series of management changes that took place way above my pay grade. And one of them in particular was a very unfortunate situation with a guy by the name of Bill Watts, who was my boss. And I had made up my mind that I just didn't want to work for the guy. He was a bully. I didn't like the way he treated other people. I didn't like the way he treated me. And I convinced my wife and myself that I was going to move to Los Angeles and continue my career in television, just not in wrestling. And it was about that time that this gentleman got fired. And another guy by the name of Bill Shaw, who was the vice president of human resources at Turner Broadcasting at the time, worked directly for Ted, came down to WCW and said, look, this is the last time we're going to have a management change like this. We're going to give this one more shot. And if we can't pull the nose up on this company, meaning WCW, Ted's going to pull the plug. And he said in that meeting with all the WCW employees, he said in that meeting, I am going to hire an executive producer from outside of professional wrestling to come in and treat WCW like a television product, not like a wrestling product. As soon as Bill said that, I sat up straight, took a deep breath and went, well, I'm going to apply for that job. Even though I was, in the wrestling business, Bill made it clear he was going to hire someone from the outside, but that's exactly what I felt WCW needed. So when I put my name in the hat, so to speak, and I interviewed with Bill Shaw, it was just a matter of, I think 2 or 3 meetings before I got the job as executive producer. From there, and at that point, I was just in charge of television. I wasn't in charge of any of the business elements of WCW. I just oversaw the production of television. Shortly thereafter, I started getting invited to meetings that had a broader application and reasons. Got involved in the live event schedule and determining whether or not we should even continue to produce live events because the company was losing money hand over fist. When I took it over, WCW was a $25 million a year company that was losing $10 million a year in the process. And I felt strongly that the business WCW had to change. So I threw my name in a hat, got the job, and just proceeded to start making those changes.
Ted Turner, what was it about wrestling that you believed was either important to him or how did it fit into the bigger picture of his organization?
If you go back and read about the history of TBS, the Superstation, and the launch of the Superstation, Ted, obviously grew up in the South. Wrestling is kind of a cultural staple of the South. It is many places, but particularly in the South. Ted believed that professional wrestling, as simple as it may be to a lot of people, appealed to a wide percentage or a large percentage of middle America. And Ted knew that was middle America was the audience for the TBS. He wasn't trying to compete with CBS or NBC or ABC. He wasn't trying to chase the high end of the demographic necessarily. He was going for middle America. And Ted believed that, and one of the reasons he kept WCW around for as long as he did while it was losing money, I was the first person to ever turn that company into a profit center for Turner Broadcasting. And I did it in a big, big way. But prior to that, WCW never made any money. It was a loss leader, but Ted believed in it as a loss leader because he knew it was attracting an audience that he could promote other programs to. So he looked at it, wrestling as more of a promotional platform as well as a revenue generating platform.
So I mentioned that I watched the McMahon documentary on Netflix, and one of the things that I didn't know was just how much WCW was how much you took WCW and you guys were actually dominating WWF at that time. Something like where Vince almost sold the whole operation for $2 million or something like that. I don't remember the specific details on it. I just always thought WWF, WWE was the much bigger organization and followed. I didn't realize how dominant you guys were. And at one point, clearly, you must have started to pull the nose up because I know that you guys were acquiring the big names for big money to move over. And then I want to, one of the things that I find so interesting about getting to talk to you is that now if you've got one of these and you know how to, get some attention, anyone could, within someone's FYP or Explore page can be a celebrity, right? Back then, TV celebrities were real celebrities. When did you realize shit, I'm in front? I mean, that storyline with nWo, like I said, when I first discovered who you were, my assumption was this is the guy who's running the whole thing. He must be writing the stories. He must own the company. It was really Did you get that in real life at that time? I mean, that real celebrity experience, like there's only so many people who are on TV, especially when you don't even have basic cable. You've got 6 channels, and WCW was on TBS, which I don't think you needed regular cable for. So I knew who you were when I was 10 years old. How did your life change when you really started, your mug started being on TV?
You know, it really didn't much. I mean, I became, I guess, self-conscious about it after a while, particularly like in Atlanta. I mean, wrestling was really, really popular in Atlanta. So there was a period of time from about 1995 through 1998 where, you know, if my wife and my kids and I went out to dinner, for example, it was pretty obvious that there were a lot of people, you know, in that restaurant watching wrestling. And you become a little self-conscious about that, you know, people staring or interrupting your meal and things. But I always looked at it as kind of a blessing in a way. I mean, it's an acknowledgement that you're doing a pretty good job.
But I mean, what's so interesting is that, you know, back then, wrestling's had to change so much because of social media. People understand now that it's a scripted thing. Back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, the conversation was still, is this real? And, you know, you played a heel most of your time on camera. Am I wrong about that?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, you were a bad guy, but yet in real life, you're a good guy. So didn't you find, did you not find that, did people not understand that back then?
You know what's really funny, dude, is I could tell you so many stories, but I'll tell you one that pretty much define the answer for you. We had a referee by the name of Randy Anderson. Now, he has since passed, died of cancer a while back. Randy was kind of you would look at Randy on camera and he had a very sympathetic face. You kind of felt sorry for him, like a dog that had been kicked a few times too many and was afraid of his own shadow. That was kind of the way Randy Anderson appeared on camera. And when he got cancer, it was kind of a public thing, and we acknowledged it on television and supportive in a very supportive way. Fast forward a couple of weeks after he announced that he had cancer, we had a storyline that kind of developed where I had to fire Randy Anderson, creatively fire him for something that he did not deserve to get fired for, because I was the boss and I was a heel, and that's what heel bosses do. They fire people for no reason, right? So, of course, I fired Randy Anderson for no reason. Really, it was to give him some time off to take care of business. But then as that storyline developed, there was a need to get a little bit more heat. So I'll paint the picture for you. I'm out on at the broadcast table. It's a live television show. The premise of that scene that night was that Randy Anderson was going to approach me at the broadcast table with his 2 little kids, which is beautiful kids, and he was going to beg for his job back. So I turned around, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were on my side, and I leaned in. Wow. And Randy's telling this sad story about, you know, and it was real. It was legitimate. So it wasn't, he didn't have to act much, talking about his situation, and started begging for his job back. And I leaned forward. I looked down at his little, I think it was his daughter. I said, come a little closer. She was scared. I said, tell your daddy he's still fired. Because, you know, I leaned back, I busted out laughing. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash are laughing, of course, at their expense. It was a very good scene. It delivered exactly what it was supposed to deliver. Wow. So much so that the next morning I came into work, and Harvey Schiller was my boss. He was president of Turner Sports at the time. He was my boss. He never called me up to his office. Never. He was too interested in hockey and other stuff, right? He didn't want to mess with me. So he called, Eric, you need to come up to my office. We need to speak. And wow, he was a colonel in the Air Force. He was kind of an intimidating guy to me anyway. So I go up to Harvey's office. I'm kind of scared. And he said, what'd you do on TV last night? I said, same thing I do every Monday night. Do 2 hours of TV, this match, that match, whatever. He goes, no. You must have done something, because I got a call from HR this morning, and the phones are on fire because you fired Randy Anderson, publicly fired an employee. And I'm looking at him like, you're looking at me, and are you kidding me? It was scripted, Harvey. It wasn't real. People in my own company thought that the character that I played on TV was the real guy. They couldn't delineate between the two. The character they see on TV and the guy they see going through the atrium on his way to his office. It's amazing to me.
That is amazing. You know, I have some clients who are young kids who are super famous on Instagram. You know, there's this one kid named Jack Doherty. He's, you know, on Instagram, he's kind of like a little punk. He's always like crashing cars and just getting arrested and being a jackass. But in real life, he's a good kid. And like you go sit down with him and hang out with him, he's just always kind of quiet or anxious or just, you know, very strategic and mindful and nice kid. But he's got the same name on camera as in real life.
Yep, so
and people have a very hard time when I tell them like, no, Jack's a great guy. And they're like, really? He's a fucking dickhead. I hate that kid. And I'm like,
you know, it's so funny. It's like if you're walking down the street, you bring a friend or family in from out of town that's never been to Los Angeles, and you're walking through Beverly Hills and you see an actor. It's kind of like an actress. It's like, oh, wow. But you realize that person that you recognize as a celebrity actor or actress isn't the character that they played in their last movie, right? Like Tom Cruise can't really fly a jet. Well, at least not a fighter jet. But with wrestling, for whatever reason, and probably the same with your influencers, is because you blur the line so much between your real personality and your job, you know, what you're promoting or whatever, people do get confused.
That's what I'm trying to say. Like as a kid in the 90s, you didn't see the Undertaker on social media as Mark. I don't remember his last name, but you know what I mean? Like it's hard to like, you know, you really thought the Undertaker was that guy. And you know, so it's very interesting how the sport has had to evolve yet still grow, you know, and growing as they are.
Well, it's interesting, you know, in your line of work and learning about your business is actually quite fascinating this morning. But there are several people, for example, Becky Lynch in WWE. I started noticing Becky Lynch back around 2019. And I noticed her because of her social media posts. She was the first person I saw in WWE that was actually using social media to help define her character that she played on television. Everybody else that I see, and to this day, and I think it's a huge mistake, particularly in any professional wrestling company, but particularly WWE because it's such a big platform. But when I see wrestlers who are themselves in social media and then expect the audience to buy them as a character, I think that's a mistake. I think smart wrestlers like Becky Lynch, and there are others who are doing it, but Becky's a great example, are really learning how to use social media to augment their work on television rather than just expose the other side of their personality.
The Bella twins do it well.
Yep.
John Cena. I mean, it really is interesting now to be elite. If you want big paydays in not just wrestling, but you know, combat sports, UFC, you've got to be strong on Instagram. Like it's going to be tough for you if you're not. I mean, like, it's weird. Like, you know, I just said to myself, let me check out what Marab's Instagram looks like, or Arman, or Ilya. Oh my God, these guys, their content's unbelievable. It like almost happened overnight. I mean, I wasn't paying attention to them. And then I said, you know, are these big name guys? And I mean, all these guys who are successful fighters, they have to have teams now for social media because, you know, that's what, if you want leverage when you're negotiating your contracts, like it's amazing if you bring an audience and say, well, look the eyeballs I can bring to a fight now. You know, Giorgio, for example, you know, Ben Askren was shitting on Giorgio for being a mediocre wrestler out of Cleveland State. And what Ben seems to not understand now is like, it's not about who's the best wrestler or who has the best body or who the best boxer is. It's who's getting the most attention. And that's, so I guess that's going to transition into my question to you about RAF. First of all, just tell me how you got involved, what your main, you know, focus is at RAF. And I think the biggest question that I have is, how do you take the psychodrama and the storylines of the professional wrestling and bring it to something that is actually a real athletic event?
I'm going to answer that one first because we just got done watching it. You know, a lot of it is the difference between what I'm doing now in terms of storytelling and what I did previously is previously we had the luxury of being able to do whatever we could imagine. If you could think it, we could do it in terms of scripted storylines. Here, not so much, because this is a legitimate sport. So the storylines have to be authentic. They have to be organic. They can't be forced. We can't make Arman, the milkman, or Giorgio, the IRS agent, right? Mm-hmm. We can create these gimmicky type characters to help identify our characters. We're taking real life athletes, but we're finding the interesting aspects of their lives and of their individual stories. And in some cases, turning up the volume on some of it, some cases turn it down, but crafting those stories out of the competition, if that makes sense. So we have to find those stories. For example, Arman and Giorgio, that's a pretty simple one. It's a
Will
rematch.
You meet privately with athletes sometimes and coach them on that aspect?
Yes, but I'm very careful about how I do it and who I do it with, because it's one of my biggest challenges in thinking about joining RIF, which, by the way, it didn't last long. I jumped in with both feet, then I started thinking about it. But I knew one of the challenges was going to be taking amateur freestyle wrestling, amateur wrestling, as it were. It's been around. It's the oldest sport known to man. It's been around forever. Nobody's been able yet, until us, to be able to figure out a way to present that product, amateur wrestling or freestyle wrestling, in an entertaining format. It's only been exposed to the masses once every 4 years in the Olympics or NCAA finals once a year on ESPN. Other than that, unless you're a friend or family member of an amateur wrestling, you don't even know it exists. You know it exists, but you don't pay attention to it.
Did you help in the production, like the visual look of the stage?
That was me and my team. Yeah,
I got to tell you something that so I helped Giorgio just as a friend think about business decisions, and I said, listen, I don't give a shit what they're offering you in Brazil or Prague or wherever. Like, look at the production. You look like a superstar in this business. You got to work with these guys. You want to go, grapple and get tapped out in some high school gym in Rio, like, be my guest, but like, you look like an idiot. Like that, I really think, first of all, and then my first time at a RAF was RAF 6 in Tempe, and I'm backstage and I said, that's Eric Bischoff. And then I look over and I see Kurt Angle sitting behind it. I said, what the fuck is going on here? I was like, they got the legends of like professional wrestling in real wrestling. And I just started getting so fascinated. Then you bring out Colby Covington and give him the microphone and he's talking shit and calling people out. But I think something interesting about marrying the two worlds is that, these super elite guys, take a David Carr, for example, or, a guy like me turns on ESPN once a year to watch the NCAA finals. And you see these guys, the pinnacle of their sport, they win the NCAA title. And what do? They gather up their sweats and they just jog off. Like, that's wrestler mentality. Yep. No, humble as fuck. They stop to get an interview. Yeah. I wrestled this match 1,000 times in my head. God is good. All the glory to God. And, a lot of respect for my competitor. I just did what I knew I could do. And I believe in myself and my family, and, God bless. And like, you have to take guys like that who literally go through hell mentally and physically, cutting weight, rashes, just, conditioning, and then got to teach them to get uncomfortable, maybe talk a little shit to sell some product.
What's interesting, going back to the question, I'm approaching certain people that I see leaning into that, because a lot of the guys that wrestle for us freestyle, they're elite. They're the best of the best, and they know that if they want to continue, if they want to make money wrestling, they've got to be entertaining. Some of the guys are getting it, and girls, women, some of them are leaning into it right away. David Carr being one of them. David Carr came out the first time wearing a crown and a robe. He leaned into King David a lot, and it was entertaining as a result. Pat Downey is another guy. He's a big personality. He's a character. He could have easily walked into professional wrestling at some point in time if that would have been his career choice, and he would have done well. So guys like that who are already leaning in, I'll nurture it. I'll turn up the volume on it a little bit, and we'll slowly but surely create characters of our own.
Who is the greatest wrestler of all time in your mind in terms of psychodrama? Guys you could always rely on for cutting promos and really just enhancing storylines.
I mean, there's several. Obviously, Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was technically not one of the best wrestlers that comes to mind In fact, far from it.
Yeah.
He would admit that if he were here with us.
Yeah, he was big and hulky and he could do the leg drop, but he
had
wasn't
the
super athletic.
He had the gift. He had charisma in a way that very few other people have, right? Rock clearly does. Steve Austin clearly did or does. Ric Flair is another name. These are all guys that could emote. You put a microphone in their hand, they could create a story, they could paint a picture, they could create emotion. But I would, of all of them, I would probably have to put Hulk at the top of the list.
If you got tapped by Ari Emanuel to come in and fix WWE or UFC tomorrow, is there anything that you would think of that you would change immediately, or a mistake combat sports or wrestling industry is making right now that nobody might want to admit?
Not really. I mean, I think the only thing that I would probably start looking at a little more closely is just how fast they're growing. They're growing so fast that any issues they're having are a result of growing a little too fast and having a little bit too much success too soon. I think the workload that Netflix put on WWE and their international footprint, that's all content that they've got to create and fulfill. So they're expanding in such a dramatic way, but you've got to feed that monster.
I assume that's just pressure from being public and shareholders, right? Like when you have to grow every quarter, you have to tell new stories, right? We're doing Power Slap, or we're doing RAF, or we're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu UFC or boxing. It feels like they have to branch out into all these things to provide shareholder growth. Am I wrong?
I'm sure that's a big part of it. I mean, you know what it's like if it's a publicly held company. You've got shareholders that are looking for returns. You've got the market that's looking to write about you and talk about you one way or the other.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure.
You may not want to go on record and choose a side, but what's a prediction you've got for this Giorgio Arman rematch?
I can't predict it. I would have said before I saw the match, before I saw the first one, I would have probably not hesitated to put my money on Arman. But I don't think I'd be willing to make that bet right now. It would be a tough bet. Giorgio's a unique individual. He's like, I was backstage when that altercation went down. I found myself, I was backstage anyway, because that's where my kind of production position is. And when Giorgio got backstage and there was a crowd around him, and I think Arman came backstage as well, and there was another big pull apart, I got right into Giorgio's, I'm going to say I got into his face. I was
standing right next to you, I remember.
And I'm looking at him. And again, I grew up in Detroit, in a crappy part of Detroit. I know when people are ready to go, and I know when they're bluffing. I can look in their eyes and tell the difference. He was ready to go. He's a special guy. So I don't think I'd be too anxious to put money on anybody on that match.
I'm going to tell you, I think if this match gets wrestled in a garage on mats with nobody around, I think Giorgio is a much better wrestler. I have a lot of respect for Arman. I think Arman, here's where my respect for Arman comes from. Arman is every week doing something different. He'll grapple, he'll wrestle, he'll do things that are not his best. Like he works on his weaknesses. He's not a freestyle wrestler. That's not his strength. And he's coming back and taking this rematch at RAF. And I have a lot of respect for that. But I think that this match is Giorgio's to lose. I think that this is a mental thing for him. And I hope the stage isn't too big. And if he can just wrestle it like he would, without any mental blocks, I think that he should win this match. I
heard him talking this morning during his interview with Chael about he was a little concerned about getting caught underneath Arman. And he also said in the interview today that after he shot on him a couple times, he realized that he was able to shoot on Arman and not get caught. I think the additional confidence or experience after the first one is probably going to give Giorgio even more confidence. And that's why I think it's a little different matchup this time.
Well, Eric, I'll tell you this much. I know there's going to be a lot of security, so I don't see as much of Arman's corner or Giorgio's family rushing to the middle of the ring to brawl. But I know both of these guys. And if they even sense that the other guy is going to, cross the line a centimeter, they're both going to go. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens.
we won't be surprised and we won't be unprepared. We were a little unprepared the first time, truth be known. And I don't get scared very easily. I've seen enough stuff that it's kind of hard to rattle me in live TV. I was rattled because when you start seeing fans and people from, the seats stepping out onto the mat or thinking about it, that's when things can get crazy. So we've taken adequate precautions for this one, and let's just hope we have a great, clean match. I just want to see a winner. That's all I want to see.
Well, we'll see you in Tampa, and I want to wish you more continued growth and passion and experience in growing this new company and in the sport of wrestling. And thanks for your service. It's been really cool I'll be honest, like I deal with a lot of pressure of running a cash flow positive business, and there's ups and downs with everything. And, putting this house and community together, getting to come into my kitchen today and seeing you standing there munching on veggies and saying, Eric Bischoff, and say, let's go sit down. It makes it all worth it for me. So it's really cool. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to kibitz a little bit.
No, I enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and really impressed with everything that you have here. I've heard about people like you, but I've never really met one. And you've got an amazing business here.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Very good.
I really appreciate
Thank you,
it.
buddy.
Thanks a lot.